today we're looking at the hymn, God of Grace and God of Glory. As Dan told us on Tuesday, this hymn was penned by a pastor as a new church, Riverside Church in New York was being founded and established, a church that still has a very significant presence in the heart of New York City. So keep that in mind. Keep that in mind that this is a prayer, a hymn written to a particular group of people for a particular circumstance, starting of a new church. But it's also a prayer that works for us, right? That's why it is still in our hymnal, even though it was written for a particular time and place, because it is a prayer for churches and individuals ourselves for God's strength and goodness. So let's work through these 4 verses. The first one says this: God of grace and God of glory, on thy people pour thy power. Crown thine ancient church's story, bring its bud to glorious flower. Grant us wisdom, grant us courage for the facing of this hour, for the facing of this hour. God of grace and God of glory, on your people pour your power. Crown your ancient church's story. So make or bring your ancient church, the one from the beginning when Jesus was sharing the gospel, the good news with the people, to the people of the way, what early Christians were called in their house churches and in their small communities, all the way through. Bring all of that into glory. Crown it. Make it outstanding. Make it noteworthy. Make it impeccable. Bring that church's bud, or this church, Riverside's church, bud into glorious flower. Grant us wisdom, grant us courage for the facing of this hour. For them in 1930, the hour of this church planting, this church that would hopefully grow into what it is today. And for us as individuals, that God's grace and glory would bloom in our hearts in such a way that we would live with God's goodness and power, crowning our lives each and every day. Verse 2. Lo, the hosts of evil round us scorn thy Christ, assail his ways. From thy fears that long have bound us, free our hearts to faith and praise. Grant us wisdom, grant us courage for the living of these days. For the living of these days. Stanza 2 is a call of recognition and a naming, if you will, of the evil that seems to triumph every day. The evil that scorns, that attacks our Christ, our beloved Christ, our Savior. Assail means to attack. So verse 2 is calling on God's grace and glory and God's strength to attack the evil that tries to attack us each and every day. From the fears that long have bound us, and for our hearts to sing thy faith and praise. That stanza I should have hanging on every wall in my home and life and office, so that I would not give in all the time to the fears that constantly bind me up. Verse 3. Cure thy children's warring madness, bend our pride to thy control. Shame our wanton, selfish gladness, rich in things and poor in soul. Grant us wisdom, grant us courage, lest we miss thy kingdom's goal. Lest we miss thy kingdom's goal. Cure us, your children, O God, from our warring madness. Bend our pride, the things that hold us captive, to your control, so we would truly be your people in all ways. Shame our wanton. Luxurious would be a more modern word for that, or lustful ways, our selfish ways, our own personal gladness. See, we can get tripped up there and think gladness, that's a gift from God. Yes, but our gladness in the things that we do, hence the mentioning of pride earlier, is what we need to bend so that we become better Christians, better people, better followers of Christ. Because we are indeed still rich in things and poor in soul. And as the end of the stanza says, lest we miss thy kingdom goals, because we miss the goals of the kingdom. We miss the goals of Christ. The fourth and final verse. Save us from weak resignation to the evils we deplore. Let the gift of thy salvation be our glory evermore. Grant us wisdom, grant us courage, serving thee whom we adore. Serving thee whom we adore. Weak resignation means giving up, right? We hear about resignations all the time. But it's a big band from weak resignation, giving up or not giving our best, to the evils we deplore. It is a whole bandwidth of things. And so this verse is saying that from that weakness of giving up to giving into the temptations and the evils that consume us, in that whole bandwidth of things, God, save us from them so that we can then move into truly living and enjoying the gift of your salvation. So that would be our glory. That would be our story. Not that the weak resignation and the evils, but that your glory, your salvation, so that we truly could serve you, O Christ, the one whom we adore, even though if we go back to the stanza, that seems to be so often what we adore, right? Giving in, giving up, giving into the temptations that are everywhere. God of grace and God of glory. We'll be singing it this Sunday, and I hope that you'll be here as we work through that and as we sing it in a way that hopefully brings new meaning as you see the words that maybe otherwise wouldn't have made sense.